Hi everyone, good evening. Hi Yogesh. Hi Yogesh, good evening. Is my audio and video okay? Is my audio and video okay? Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so today I want to touch on the React side of things, the front end side of things. Okay, for a backend developer, it is relatively difficult to showcase what all you have done, right? So, in my opinion, at least you should have a little bit knowledge of the front end side or the React. Okay, I will show you that it is not very difficult, first of all, and it is already what you have learned so far, right? So, even for the backend devs, you should know at least a bit of React or a bit of front end so that you can showcase your project very well. Right. Let's talk about React. So basically, on your website, if you inspect element or if you have learned HTML, it looks like this, right? Inside this, we have head and body. Okay, this is the basic HTML that you should be aware of, right? What happens is, uh, Facebook team or the React team, what they saw was whenever some data was changing, whenever uh, from an API or uh, any type of data is changing, then you are updating your UI. So what they did was this internally is basically a tree where this is the HTML node, this is the head node, and this is the body node, right? So internally, what happens is this gets converted into this, which is called DOM or document object model. We have object in the name, right? So in JavaScript, it is represented as an object. Okay. But in data structure terms, this is basically a tree. So what the team did was to make your website much more performant, much more efficient. Also, they were backend devs, right? So to make this updation much more performant, much better, what they did was they created two clones of the same tree. Okay, based on the fact that JavaScript is much faster than HTML update. Okay, so the in the browsers, most of the computation, most of the memory allocation, most of the RAM allocation, all that thing is given to JavaScript, correct? So that all your logic runs fast, uh, all the computations happens very fast and everything. So since most of the resources are given to JavaScript, JavaScript is much faster as comparison to actual HTML updates. So what they did was inside the JavaScript code where the JavaScript resides, the heap, right? They created two clones of the same HTML. They created two clones of the same tree. Okay. Now what happens is whenever some data updates, for example, this node I painted it black. Okay. So what happens is in the JavaScript, they see the difference between the two trees and they find out that okay, the update is only on this node, right? When they find out that which node to update and what to update, they try to get something called a key. They have key for each and every node present in your HTML. Okay, all this is data structure stuff. I hope you guys are aware of trees and keys and so on. Okay, with this key, they try to find out the same thing inside your actual HTML tree. Okay, and they target that specific element and do the updates. Okay, this whole process is called reconciliation algorithm, right? So it creates two copy of the same tree, find out the difference between each one of them, and try to get the exact node to update. Okay, using keys, right? And then using uh, document dot get element by ID or whatever, using the web APIs, they update that specific node only. Till here, everything is understood. You guys understood till here, right? This is all DSA part, right? There is nothing new in this. Just find out the difference between the trees using some algorithms and check specifically which node is updated. Get the key of that node and using the document APIs, using the web APIs, update that specific node. That's it. That is the whole React. Okay. React is a library and not framework. What is the difference between a library and a framework? A library only does specific things. Okay, for example, in case of React, it only has the reconciliation algorithm. That's it. Okay, so it is designed for one specific thing. We have been using libraries throughout, right? We have Express is a library, Mongoose is a library, right? Sequelize is a library. A framework, on the other hand, tries to incorporate as many things as possible. Okay, it tries to give you whatever in any specific project that you're going to require. Okay, there are frameworks for your backend for Node.js called uh, Nest or Next, Nest.js, I guess. I don't remember exactly. Okay, let us find out. Yes, the name of the framework is Nest.js. It is a very popular framework which tries to give you many things out of the box. Okay, it tries to give you controllers, it tries to give you Express like services, it tries to give you some utility functions. What we have been creating from scratch, many of the things Nest provide. Okay, so Nest is a framework for Node.js, which tries to provide very common functions or functionalities or features, which is very common in most of the projects. Okay, for React, there is Next.js. For backend, there is Nest, and for frontend, there is Next. There is also CRA or Create React App official from Facebook. So these try to provide many things that that is very common in most of the projects. For example, they try to provide Webpack inbuilt. Okay, they try to provide Babel inbuilt. We have already talked about Webpack. Let's talk about Babel. Babel is nothing but it converts your, for example, TypeScript or ES6 all to ES4 or ES5 maybe. Okay, which most of the browsers understand. Yes, modern JS to old JS. Basically, Babel converts modern JS to old JS. That is the only purpose of Babel, right? All these technologies can be used on both front end and back end, right? Then we have learned models, views, and controllers, right? On the back end. On the front end, also, there are alternatives to this. For controllers, we have components where most of the code resides, most of the logic resides. So we try to make functions that does any specific thing, correct? Inside controllers. In the same way, in components, we try to make uh, functions that does specific things. For example, show a button does all the handling of clicking, redirecting it to a different page, and things like those. Okay. For views, we have routes. For models, we don't have exactly anything. We mostly write it in constants, right? Because models does not make sense on the front end, right? Then we are also going to touch Redux. What happens is, acha, before Redux, I told you React does the reconciliation algorithm on the change of data, right? But what is data in terms of React? So data is of two types. One is state and one is props. Basically local and coming from parent. Okay. So whenever there is a change in the local data or data coming from parent, React treats it as a change in the data and updates the UI, right? But the problem is, say this is the tree. This has several branches. Now, suppose a person logs in. Suppose a person logs in, your API sends the user data back to the client, right? Now, this user data needs to be present in all the rest of the pages. For example, after login, I am redirecting it to dashboard. So this user data needs to be present in the dashboard as well, right? But there is only two way of dealing with data in React. One is the local data management, that is a state, and one is coming from prop. So if this is login and this is dashboard, the only way to share the data between login and dashboard is via this parent. correct? We have to maintain the user data in this parent, which will give the data to both login as well as on dashboard, right? So this is a difficult thing because this user data is needs to be there in all the pages. For example, there are hundreds of pages. This user data needs to be there for everyone, right? And if there is any update in the user data, then that update should be present in all of our pages. So Redux team came in. They said, we are going to create a database type of a structure, right? Which is called a global state. We are going to create a MongoDB type of database where we have a very big object. Okay. Whenever you make any update, update it over here, and we are going to give it to all the pages that require this data. Okay. So this is just like MongoDB, which is a very big object with keys. For example, the user key, the request key, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Can you guys see the common things between a front end and a back end? In backend also we save it like this. We have different models for each one of them. In front end also we save it like this. It's just that we either can write models or we cannot. It is just a very big object. Okay. So here also we have routes. Here also we have DB. Here also we have controllers. It is very similar to backend. Do you guys agree? In Redux, whenever you want to set any data uh, to the global state, you call something called an action. Okay, because you're performing an action, right? You're performing an action. This is simply a function call, nothing else. This is simply a function call which is called an action in the Redux terms. Okay. Now, even in MongoDB, we have a very big object with different type of keys, right? For user, for request, etc., etc. But we divide these into different models or tables or whatever, right? In Redux terms, these are called reducers. Okay, so in place of models, in front end we have something called reducers. Any doubt till here? Any doubt till here? No? Okay. Chalo. Let's get coding first. When you want to start, when you want to start your React application, the simplest way of doing it is using npx create React app. Npx create React app. Sorry. And then your project name. Okay. For example, I am going to call this day 27, it is right. It sets up a project for you with all the things that you're going to require. Okay, simply go to, did it create? No. Right. It installs everything. You simply have to write npx create react app at the rate latest and the name of the project. Okay. It installs everything for you. It installs Webpack, it installs Babel, it installs most of the things that you require. So this is a framework, Create React App. It is created by Facebook. Now, whatever we have been doing on the backend, we do it on the front end as well. We install packages, right? Like Express and things like those. So it does everything for you. Just give it a second. By the time, let me show you the backend code that we discussed yesterday. We started with index.js. We have a server running in index.js, right? Then we created a different app in app.js where we had all the middlewares. We created API slash auth for users, API slash request for requests, right? Then we had created two middlewares for unknown endpoint and error handler. Let me show you the middlewares as well. We created token extractor, which basically get the authorization, checks if it has bearer token, and sets request.token to the token. Then we have error handler, which has different type of switch case for validation error, for JSON web token error, for token expiration, for sequelize. Then we have token validator, which basically gets the token from request.token and decode the token, and if the ID is not present, it would send invalid token login again. Then we have unknown endpoint which sends 404, and we have validate token which does the same thing, right? In DB we were using SQLite, so we have new SQLize, the name of the table, the user, the password, the dialect, and where the .sqlite file is going to be stored. Then we have SQLize.authenticate to start the SQLize server, right? Uh, then we have our controllers in the request. We have get to get all the requests from the user. We decode the token. We find it in the request table from the user ID, right? Then in each of the requests, we set headers as empty array. Then Then we were finding out all the headers from the headers table and setting it inside this, right? If you want to get any specific request, then basically you have to find the request from request find by PK from the request ID, right? Find all the headers with the request ID, convert it into JSON. In the headers, uh, in the headers of the request, put all the found headers and send it back to the client. Okay, this is the same thing. For deleting, basically find it from the user and do dot destroy for both request as well as headers. Right. If you want to create any specific headers, then find the user find the request, create the headers, and put it inside the request ID, right? Uh, then, if you want to delete, then find the user, find the headers, and do dot destroy. Okay. For user routes, simply if you want to get the user, you have slash from with token extractor and token validator middlewares. Simply do response.json. Uh, if this is for validating the token. If this is passed, simply send the valid token is valid. Okay. Then if you want to sign up, then you get username and password from frontend. You hash the password using bcrypt. You save it inside the user, okay, and send the saved user back. For login, you get user and password. You find the user in the table, check if the password is correct or not, right? Then generate the token using jwt.sign and send back the token username and ID back to the client. Okay. Now, yes, this is set up now. Let's move to day 27. Again, do npm start. It will start the server for you. This is the basic React app that you get. An icon, rotating icon, some text, and a link. Okay. If you go to the code, why is day 27 not showing up? Yeah. Right. So it has set up a package.json that we were creating manually. It has created a folder for us, src folder, a public folder where we have our index.html, some icons, and some rest of the files. And we have some JavaScript to get started. Okay. In package.json, we have all these dependencies with us: React, React DOM, React scripts, web vitals, and it has created some scripts for us: start, build, test, eject. Okay. Then we have some ESLint and all these things. You do not have to worry about them. The code starts from index.js. Okay. Simply do npx create react app at the rate latest, and then your uh, folder name. Just like in the backend, we required if we required express, we were importing it or requiring it. On the front end also, you do the same thing. Import React from React because we are going to use React. Okay. Let me simply show you the code, not to go into very much details. In your index.js, we first have to set up your Redux, right? Just like in backend, we have index.js, then app.js. Over here also, I've divided it into index.js and app.js. Over here, to first create your DB connection, you need to create this thing, create DB function, right? Over here, you have configure store, which is coming from your Redux or Redux toolkit. Okay. Then inside this, again, import or require a module, call its function, pass in some options, just like we have been doing on the backend as well, right? So configure store. Then inside the reducer, you write the structure of the database that you want. Okay, the name of the table name would be user, the table name would be request, and these would be the models for them: user reducer and request user. Okay, then you pass in this store to a provider component. Here, uh, since the only difference between React and Node.js is inside function, you simply return some values, right? On the backend, here you return some HTML. When you return some HTML, you do not call the function. If you see provider, this is a function, right? This is coming from inside, but we'll show you later. This is basically a function name with a capital letter, or you can treat it as a class, whatever, right? Because it is returning an HTML inside your function, you cannot simply call it like this. Otherwise, your JavaScript will get confused whether to treat it as a normal function or a React function, right? So to solve this, we call that function like this, and you pass in the parameters like this. Okay, so this store is a parameter. The value of this is the function that we have created over here. Okay, and inside this, whatever you want to show. Again, this is also a function. See, this is a function which is returning some HTML. The browser or JavaScript, so that they do not get confused, you cannot call this function directly like this. You have to call that function like this. Okay, and suppose if it was accepting some parameters, for example, uh, name, email, etc. Okay, so you pass these parameters like this: name, email, like this. Okay, you pass in the parameters like this. Simply they are functions, nothing else. See, over here we have a function called, which is returning some HTML. That's it. That is the only difference between frontend and backend. The rest of all is JavaScript only. Okay. So inside your Node.js, whenever the next thing what you do is you create these routes, right? API auth, API request. Over here also you create routes. You create routes using create browser router, and you pass in the array of object where you tell him the path name. So if slash, call this function. Okay. Uh, the children of that would be over here. So if it is coming slash request ID, call this function. Slash login, call this function. Slash sign up, call this function. Right? And in the last, render each one of them is like this. Till here, everything is understood. Till here, everything is understood. Just like you were creating middlewares in your backend, you have to create some routes on the front end as well. Okay, this is how you create it. Using create browser router, array of object, the main route, the subroutes, and the function to be called, controller to be called. Okay, now let's come to app.js. I told you for using Redux, if you want to save something inside Redux, you need to call an action. So we have this function to uh, call the actions. Okay, use dispatch, which is coming from your React Redux. Okay, it returns a function. Inside this function, whatever function you call is treated as an action. Understood? Inside this function, whatever function you call is treated as an action. So, what is an action? Basically, it is to update the DB call. Inside this, if we look, this is returning a function in which we are accepting a dispatch. This is again making an API call using user service is valid token. Just like we created middlewares, over here also we have created some middlewares. Right? Is valid token we have created on the backend also. Over here also we have created the same thing. Same async await, okay, exiles.get, headers, response.data, whatever. Same JavaScript, whatever you were writing on the backend, you have to write over here as well. It returns either the data or false uh, if the API calls fails. Over here, we have the exis.get. Okay, it makes the actual API call to this URL plus API auth. Okay, with the header set as the bearer token. Now, if there is error, we console log the error. Otherwise, we call the next function. Okay, or the this thing back. Okay, so whatever function you call inside dispatch function, it makes a DB update and it updates the data whichever is returning from the middleware. Over here, see, we are getting the valid user. If we are getting the valid user, we are setting again, making a DB call to set the user with the user that we are getting. Okay, inside the set user, we simply in the local storage, just like we have learned Redis on the backend, we have local storage on the front end. We have set and get in Redis also. We have set item and get item in uh, front end local storage. The key and the uh, returned value as stringified. Okay, so to trace it, you simply start with index.js. You get all the routes over here. Okay, then you go to app.js, inside which we have shown navbar, we have shown the main, we have shown the outlet. Okay, these are three different function call which is returning some HTML. All these HTML come together to create the whole DOM or the tree that we talked about. Okay, all these are divided into multiple files. Uh, uh, Webpack bundles it all together and sends to front end. Okay, so let me show you the result as well. Right. On the first screen, whenever we have slash, we have login and sign up on the top and please log in on the bottom. Okay. It is coming from here. We have this navbar. We are calling this function which is returning another HTML. right? If we have user, it will show the user with the button of logout, right? If suppose you want to write some JavaScript inside HTML, then you have to use curly braces in React. Inside the curly brace, whatever you write, it would be treated as JavaScript, not HTML by React. Okay. If we do not have user, then you have to show two buttons for login and sign up. Okay. We have two buttons for login and sign up. When we click on sign up, this is a link tag which is redirecting to slash sign up. Okay. Where are all our routes written? It is written in in index.js. For sign up, we have this function. Okay. Inside this, see, state we talked about, right? The local data, it is used using use state. Okay, it returns two things. The variable in which the state is saved and the function with which you can update this variable. Okay, simply if you call this function with whatever value, it is updated to this variable, and wherever this variable is used, the updated value goes. Okay, so we have a form in which we have two input and a button. We have a form in which we have two input and a button. For sign up, whenever we click on this button on form submit, we are calling this function inside which we have written async and await. Okay, we are dispatching the sign up user function, and afterwards in the callback we are navigating it to slash login. Okay, uh, when I hit sign up, I have been redirected to slash login now. Inside this sign up user, we have written user service dot sign up. Again, model view controller wala concept. User service dot sign up with the username and password coming from the inputs. In the sign up, we have written exires.post, whatever our backend URL is, plus API auth sign up with this username and password. Okay, it makes a post call to our backend, whatever the URL we have set in your .env. Okay, so it makes a post call, returns the data, and calls this function and saves it into database. Okay, on the login, again, it is navigating to slash login. The routes are written over here. Whenever we have slash login, it will call this function. Inside this function, we again have a form with two inputs and a button, clicking of which we are again dispatching uh, a function which will return your user data sets is in the database and navigate to slash. Right? Are you guys understanding this? The only difference between a front end and a back end is on the front end, we have functions that return some HTML. To call these functions, we have to write it like HTML and pass the parameters like this. Okay. Rest everything is whatever we have learned on the backend as well. Okay. Always remember whether it is Node.js, whether it is front end, whether it is Python, whether it is Golang, whether it is any language in the world. Your code only represents whatever you have been thinking and whatever steps are in your mind that you want your computers to reproduce. Okay? If you have your steps laid down in front of you, then it is just a matter of writing your thoughts in English or in JavaScript. Okay? Inside your login, you wanted to show a form with two inputs and a button. You have a function in which you have a form with two inputs and a button, clicking of which you want to make an API call to the backend. So on submit, you have this function, right, which makes an API call to the backend, returns the data, saves it in the database, and then navigate to your slash. This is what you wanted, and this is all what you have written. Are you guys understanding this? Right. So the code is in the description. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of whatever you have learned so far is the way you think, and you can apply the same concept in any field that you work with, whether it is data science, whether it is any type of programming language, whether it is front end, whether it is mobile app development. As long as you are writing the code, it is just a way of making your thoughts in front of your screen. That's it. Okay. You have to think in a very, very atomic way that is not further cannot be distributed even more, right? And then you have to put down your thoughts in terms of your language, whatever you have chosen. Yes, dispatch is updating a Redux store. On the backend, uh, we were calling this uh, models, right? This is exactly that. Whatever function you pass in dispatch, it updates the store. So inside this, we again have a dispatch, which is again setting the user. We are making an API call. Okay. We are making an API call, getting the user from the API call. How do we make an API call? We make an API call using exis.post, exis.get, whatever, with the URL and the data that you want to send. Okay. This is returning a response. We are returning this response.data back over here. Your backend is returning a user. Then we are again calling a dispatch set user with the user that backend has provided. This set user, what it is doing is, it is in your state dot user. We have a global state, right? So we have a create slice named function, which is used to create the reducer. This is the name of the table. This is the initial state, user as null. Okay. If you just state dot user is whatever the backend is providing, this line will update your global state. Okay. So all these are connected like this. Understood now, Harsh? On the backend, since we already have a connection with the database, we can directly do the updates with the models. Over here, it is just divided into actions reducers. For creating reducers, you need to call this function create slice. And for creating actions, you need to call the dispatch method. This also is coming from your React Redux. Understood? Right. You can find the code of the front end as well in the description. If you guys have any doubts, I would be there on the Discord channel. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of whatever you have learned so far in the backend is also applicable on the front end, or for that matter, anywhere. Okay, as long as you are using JavaScript, JavaScript is used to create n number of things. As long as you are using JavaScript, the same concept can be applied anywhere. Okay. So, yes, this was all for today's class. I hope this was something uh, new for you, right? And I hope you guys can read the front end code as well from now. Great. So, this was all for today's class. I will meet you in the Mahasabha VC. Peace.